All right. Greetings, everyone. My name is Kate Rademacher, and I'm delighted to be here with you for Writing for Your Life second Tuesday discussion group for writers. And for those of you who are new to this event, we meet monthly at currently at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the second Tuesday of the month, with a couple of exceptions when there's other big things going on in the world. And so I'm really delighted to be kicking us off for the 2024 year. And I'd really like to invite everyone who's here in person. We're recording this also, and we'll post it online afterwards, to put your name and where you're calling in from in the chat box. It's always fun to see where people are calling in from. For those of you who don't know me, I'm again Kate Rademacher, and some of you know, was really honored and incredibly, just delighted at this time last year to assume leadership of Writing for Your Life, which is a platform for spiritual writers, which was founded by Brian Elaine, who previously served as the founding director of the Fred Buechner Center. So it's been really incredible. I've learned so much, and I'm really delighted to be here talking with you about goal setting, which is a bit of a misnomer because I wanted to include this slide as we get going on this topic. If you want to make God laugh, tell God about your plans, right? So I think for those of us who identify as spiritual writers, we and who anyone who lives in the world today, we just live in really such uncertain times and multiple levels. And so things are really changing. And, I think part of our job as spiritual writers is to stay centered in spiritual practices that sustain us, and bring that forward into our creative life, including our writing. But I'll be talking more about that in a minute. But I also just wanted to say a special welcome. I have a surprise special guest tonight. My mom, Lynn Holbein, is here. And my mom My mom is an accomplished watercolor painter, and what she doesn't often give herself enough credit for, she also writes blogs. I think about once a week, Mom, is that right? So I'm going to have my mom introduce you, and she's done some really fun thinking about goal setting in the new year. So I wanted her to be our surprise guest speaker. But in the meantime, let me just also say what we're going to do tonight. So, for those of you who just are coming in, please introduce yourself in the chat and say where you're calling in from. It's fun to see the range of locations around the country. And I'm just going to give a few remarks. I'm going to talk for maybe about 10 minutes. And then I'm going to ask our guest speaker, my mom, watercolor painter Lynn Holbein, to give 5 or 10 minutes of remarks. And then I want to open it up for Q&A and discussion. And so, if there's, we won't have a ton of time, and I'm going to actually stop recording during well, I may keep it on if there's Q&A, but I want to have a little bit of time for unrecorded discussion, because a really important part of these events for Writing for Your Life is community building and connection. So just want to give us a chance to talk to one another in the new year. But this is kind of the presentation component. So, okay, so um, yeah. So just moving forward, I wanted to just, invite all of us to think about the title. The name of this group, Writing for Your Life, I think sort of speaks to it for me. It's, we're living our stories with our lives. So one of the questions, I would have for you all, and for myself, is what story are you telling with your life at this season? And that can be, of course, what you're choosing to write about or what you're discerning whether to write about, but it also is just for me the way I'm living in the world. And so perhaps maybe as for those of us who identify as writers or storytellers, a question might be, what story is God telling through our lives? What story do we want to be telling with our lives and how we move through spaces? Are there parts of your story that you're not ready to share? And I think that this is a really important question for spiritual writers to be discerning, is sort of how you craft a story, what you include and what you don't include, in some ways are as important as anything. So, that's a question to contemplate. How and when and with whom do you want to share these stories? For those of you who heard me give a couple talks online last year, what I've really been saying to people is the world is so noisy. The World Health Organization is telling us that we live in an infodemic. So we're just sort of being bombarded with information. And so, really the spiritual practice of discernment of when we're being called to share our writing and our stories, with whom and how, I think are really important questions in this age of sort of information overload. And then what is the best channel or medium for your words or your creativity? Is it words? And then within words, again, for those of us who identify as spiritual writers, is it narrative nonfiction, memoir, poetry, song lyrics, creative writing, sermons, prayers, meditations? So what kind of, what words are you being called to write in this season of your writing life? And again, especially in the spirit of information overload, are you being called to integrate visual arts in new ways? Are you being perhaps on social media challenged to think about how to share images? I love Instagram, for example, because it's so image heavy. Um, what conversations are you being called to enter into? And one of the things I gave a talk on thought leadership that's saved on our YouTube channel for those who missed it. And one of the things I really emphasize in that talk is we're all part of dozens, if not hundreds, of conversations, at the family level, at the internal level, in hopefully with the divine in our prayer life and our faith life, but also with our, church communities, our local communities, but within our country, with globally. So what conversations are important to you, and how do you want to contribute and show up in those spaces where those conversations are happening? And then, are you being called? Is this a time of increased silence for you? I've been, since the new year began, rereading a book written by an author friend of ours, Colm Coleman, and he wrote Befriending Silence, Discovering the Gifts of Cistercian Spirituality. I bumbled that, but I just love the phrase befriending silence. And I think as spiritual writers, again, befriending silence can be just as much an important practice as finding the words to say or to write. I'm also sorry, I screwed up the screen there for a second, but what I'm also realizing for me, in this season of my writing, is I'm really embracing a broader recognition and remembrance of my creative life. And that's one reason I'm excited to have our guest speaker today. Because my mom, Lynn Holbein, is here as our guest speaker, and she's a watercolor artist, and she's a visual artist, and I think of myself as a writer. But I learned from my mom. I love color, and I also used to be a dancer. I was never a serious dancer, but I was a dancer throughout young adulthood, and I don't necessarily think of myself as a dancer these days. But again, how are we being shown up? How are we being invited to show up in different ways, perhaps integrating perhaps a multidisciplinary approach to our creative life in this new season? So these are just some questions and prompts for you to consider as we move forward in the conversation. One thing I really wanted, I titled this talk "Goal Setting for Spiritual Writers" with a little bit of intended, I don't know if irony is the right word, but we're, really challenging us to think about, again, what does it mean to be a spiritual writer? And for some of I have published 3 books about my faith life, and the first one, Fallen Red Bird, you can see the part of the book cover there in the background. I wasn't planning to be a published author. I've always written, but this was not something I intended to do, but I really truly felt this sort of undeniable call to write about my faith journey. And so once I had a draft manuscript, I wasn't sure what to do next. And I took a lot of writing classes, a lot. I did a lot of workshops. I did, events. I did online courses in person because I wanted to know what you're supposed to do when you're a writer. And as many of you know, one of the key things that people recommend is platform building. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But again, this space is a space for people who identify as faith-based or spiritual writers. And so what I want to remind myself and all of you, and the message that I felt like was missing from all those classes I took, was, for me, writing is a spiritual practice. Writing is the most amazing and remarkable way, one of the most amazing and remarkable ways I've encountered the Holy Spirit, God's work in my life, in an ongoing way. And so, you know, I there's a lot of noises in the world of how to turn that into a commodity or, become preoccupied with the concerns of the world, whether that's competitiveness or, scale or all these things. And just to really stay grounded in why I was called to the writing life in the beginning. And so in the spirit of that, I was thinking about my overall goal today as a writer and as a person on a faith journey. And the image on the, I guess whatever it is left for you all, and the three dots, so often I'm focused on my agenda, pitching my next book idea to an editor, or expanding my reach on X platform, climbing some imagined rung on the ladder of success or reach or impact. And again, I just have been so aware in this season of Christmas and Epiphany, for those of you who follow the Christian liturgical year, of just, being centered in God's time and God's agenda rather than mine. And sort of how um, my focus as a writer and as a creative person and as a professional and a parent changes as I move from being more what I would say driven by my agenda to being spirit led. So again, I just want to bring that to us as we start this new year together. And I've personally made a renewed commitment in that spirit to time for daily prayer, meditation, and other contemplative practices, a Sabbath observance. Some of you know that my last book, Reclaiming Rest, was focused on Sabbath keeping as a spiritual practice. But then also, what I did as part of my exploration of contemplative practices previously was time for a monthly or quarterly retreat day. And I've really fallen away from that personally. So I'm recommitting to that. And I know from experience that these this time of quiet, these time of these practices of um, of contemplative practices, including my daily prayer practice, is really what fuels my creative life in so many ways, because I'm spending a lot of time listening for God's voice of what I'm being called, because I feel so deeply that writing is part of my vocational call. I spend a lot of time in discernment, prayerful discernment of what I may be being called to write next. So I have this quotation up on in my room, and I just wanted to share it with you all today because this is a quote from Maya Angelou, the late Maya Angelou, and she writes or says, "The idea is to write it so that people hear it and it slides through the brain and goes straight to the heart." And I just really appreciate this words, and just a reminder to all of us as we think about goal setting for our writing lives, staying grounded in good writing, and the craft and the skill of being excellent communicators. I think, again, for those of you who maybe are farther along in the writing and publication path, I find that you can get so focused on thinking about what concept might, be attractive to an agent or to an editor or to a target audience, that that they're, or, how to build presence through social media platforms, et cetera, that there can really be lost in all of that noise, a focus and a centeredness on excellent writing. So I think we all can become better, clearer, more concise, more evocative, more creative writers. And so that's part of my goals for the new year, is to continue to improve as a writer. In addition, there I saw a friend over the holidays who is a longtime literary editor and developmental editor, and I was bemoaning the need to do platform building and, sort of hoping she would excuse me from it. And she said, "That's just the hustle that's required in the writing life." So we can unpack that. For those of you who are interested in platform building, whether that's because you're trying to pitch a book proposal to an editor or you're trying to grow a potential readership. One thing that I was coaching a colleague the other day is to consider expanding your activity on channels that you own or control. For those of you who are active on social media, I think one of the biggest surprises for me I think it was 2023, maybe it was started in 2022, was the sort of demise, the shift from Twitter to X, and what that meant for people who had invested a lot in the Twitter platform. So, for example, my cousin, who's a college professor, clearly had spent a lot of time investing in Twitter as a platform to disseminate and engage in, pretty serious conversation about important topics related to policy and his academic interests. And, I think with what's happened with Twitter and the transition to X really shows, and this is the advice that everyone gives in those writing classes I was referring, is that you need to have a way to communicate with your potential core readers, ideally that you control. And that's why every writing class will say, or platform building class will say, a priority should be for writers or emerging writers is having a website and then investing in your own newsletter distribution, because you control, if you own the email addresses, you can control the messages that go out. If you're relying on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn to reach your readers, you don't control those platforms. You don't, if LinkedIn went away tomorrow and that's where you're blogging primarily. So just to be saying, you may want to consider, for those of you who don't have a website and don't have an e-newsletter list, that's one of the top priorities for the new year. Alternatively, there may be channels or meet platforms where you want to have a wider, you want to just push out of your comfort zone and expand. So for some of you heard last year, I gave the example where I posted a blog about my husband's diagnosis of Parkinson's disease and a poem I wrote on my personal website and blog, but then I also posted it on Medium, which is a podcast, a blog site that anyone can post on. And it's really been well received. And that was sort of a challenge for me, a challenge outside my comfort zone. So again, pushing ourselves perhaps to do new things that aren't as comfortable. And then I just want to say finally, as we think about our goal setting, in addition to really being spirit-led and staying centered in spiritual practices of discernment in the context of community, is to supporting one another to be brave and to dream big. And I've been talking with some Writing for Your Life colleagues and friends about potential events in 2024, and I had a really big, crazy idea. And my writer friend said to me, like, Kate, I just don't, what I love about you is that you dream big. And I didn't even think of that. It didn't feel big to me. It felt ambitious perhaps, but it felt reasonable, like something we could really accomplish. And so, I encourage you to dream big. And the other thing is, one of my favorite writing coaches, Sue Campbell, talks about the goal sandwich, and she leads writers through this activity where she, has them reflect on what their dream goals are. And, that's the other thing is take time to reflect and recognize the progress along the way. I was thinking about this over Christmas, what's my goal as a writer? Really, when you like boil it down to it. And I was like, what I really want to do is like be respected by people, by writers and thinkers that I respect, and be part of a meaningful conversation. And I thought to myself, but wait a minute, I'm already there. Like, so I think we imagine that there's some goalpost out there that we are far, that we're not at yet. But I really have been encouraged by Sue Campbell and others to say where you are is such a blessing, and it will, your writing life will continue to unfold, but to sort of, recognize and appreciate where you are and where God's gifts are to you in the season that you're in right now. So those are my words of encouragement. I'd be happy again to take specific questions. This is also we're going to have our guest speaker who's going to share a little bit about her own goal setting for 2024. And then just be thinking about if you have specific questions for us related to our remarks, but also if you have like, I'm confused about, I may not have the answer, but you can share some of those with the group because others in the group may know as well. So now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you all to my wonderful and vivacious mother, Lynn Holbein. And Mom, maybe you can just tell everybody a little bit about your, I know you've had a long creative life, but maybe your watercolor life. And then tell us about your New Year's resolutions or goal setting. Thanks, Mama. Welcome.
Thanks, Kate. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're great.
Kate, if you don't mind, I would prefer to be spotlit. And I've got then, rather than looking at these slides, is that okay?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Mom, I just turned off your video. Can you turn it back on? That was an accident. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
For everyone. Okay. And you want me to stop sharing the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Hi. I live about 23 minutes from Kate. We moved down here from Boston 3 years ago during COVID. Kate just asked me to do this yesterday, and she's going to kill me when I say this, but I don't love the dream big thing. I like the second part of what she said, which is ask yourself over and over, what do I want? Not what does the New York Times bestseller list want. I've been an artist for 27 years, and I once asked two fellow artists what they wanted, and one of them said, I want to win shows, and the other one said, I want to sell paintings. And I said, I don't want either one of those things. I want to share my work, and that's what motivates me to paint. And Kate showed one slide, but this is what I've been doing for 7 years. I don't know if you can see this. You probably can't. Yeah, can you now? Every week I send out a painting with a message to, that's our dog. That's my husband, Kate's dad. And every week I have to do a painting. And I've now, after 7 years, I have over 1,000 people who get my email every week. And I'm never going to be on the New York Times. I'm never going to be at the Met. I have a very limited, I'm in my 70s, Kate's in her 40s. Maybe that's age appropriate. I'm just really happy with what I'm doing and where I'm at. So don't let anybody convince you that your work is no good if you're not selling 20,000 copies. In my opinion, if you want to give it to your 6 best friends and that's what your goal is, that's awesome. Now, Kate actually asked me to talk about these funny New Year's resolutions that I came up with. So I'm gonna, and this is again, what do I want? I spent a couple of weeks thinking, what bases do I want to touch every single day that are small and doable? So my first one is spirit. Every morning I meditate or pray, and then I journal and write down 3 gratitudes. And everybody tells you you'll be happier if you write down every day 3 gratitudes. And then I write my to-do list for the day. And everybody tells you you will live a better life if you write a to-do list, because you'll be organized, but small things, not clean my entire bedroom. Like spend 10 minutes cleaning my bedroom, because I hate cleaning my bedroom. 10 minutes, anybody can do that. Then create for 10 minutes. So I just sit down at my desk and pull out my paints, and I set my timer literally, because I don't want to make a masterpiece. I just want to paint a little bit today. Then this is a new one for me. I think of something in the past. This is Squirrel, by the way. That's the only way I can remember it, is to come up with a nickname. So several times a day I said, go through Squirrel, what have I forgotten? And I realized about an hour ago, I'd forgotten learning for today. So then I go back in the past and randomly and think of one trip I took, or I thought one restaurant that when we lived in Boston that we used to go to a lot, and just tried to remember everything about that restaurant, where the front door was, is a sushi restaurant, where the sushi bar is, or just anything from your past, the dinners you had last week. Then half an hour of exercise. I do yoga and walk. That's my form of exercise. And then one new thing that I'm going to learn today. Yesterday, believe it or not, I looked up Marlene Dietrich. Why did I look up Marlene Dietrich? I don't know. Today I looked up I looked up Bob Dylan. Usually go to Wikipedia and just look up something random. The week before, I looked up how are forests connected with an underground network of fungi. So now I know 10 minutes worth of stuff about that. So this is just my personal thing, but it all comes down to, what do I want and what's small and doable? So that's it. Kate.
Thank you. Yay. And I appreciate for those of you who maybe missed it, my mom was our surprise guest speaker today, Lynn Holbein. So, and she's a watercolor artist. So, I just wanted to spend the rest of the time opening this up for sort of discussion, and that could be kind of Q&A, or also just hearing sort of what the phrase, goal setting evokes for you, positive or negative, and what maybe some of your goals are for the year, or if you have other questions for members of the community. What I think I'm going to do is leave the recording going on for the next 10 minutes or so, just in case there's questions that are sort of more, that others might be interested in. And then I'll turn off the recording because there may be sort of some discussion we want to have not recorded. So does anybody want to jump in with a comment or a question or something that you are prioritizing for goal setting for the new year as a writer?
Well, I just want to jump in, or else I'll forget about it. But it's kind of a goal that's not in my control. So the question is there any upcoming Writing for Your Life conference on the boards for 24?
Great question. So you're punting this back to my goal setting for the year.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that's a good question. And actually, I would love to use, if there's some time, I would love to use some of this call to get feedback from those of you who are on the line about what is maybe most supportive to you and your writing goals for the coming year, because there's a lot of options that I'm exploring with potential collaborators. So I don't have a lot of final decisions on that, but why don't we hold that to the end? Because again, I want to, if there's questions, if you don't mind, can we just hold that question maybe for a few minutes, so we can have a broader brainstorming, and I'm going to put it back to you all. But the short answer
Sure.
is no confirmed right now in-person events for 2024, but we're exploring a couple of options. Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Oh, Kate, this is Mimi Glaze. I don't have
Hi,
my
Mimi.
video on, but I really loved what your mother had to say. And I always take notes. I'm a voracious note taker, and I'm in the 70s as she is, so I can really relate to this. But I have been, I don't know, a part of Writing for Your Life for a few years now, when it started with Brian.
Yes.
So I am called to spiritual writing, but I have to start my day in a spiritual practice. And I've been journaling for more than 50 years. So that's not for publication per se, but it centers me to be able to write what's going on in my life, or even my prayer life as it relates to things in the world. I really did something last night that I haven't done before. And I also don't want to take too much time here, but I did want to listen a little bit to the news in Gaza. And I was able to form some prayers, which I said based on the needs that actually were put out by Doctors Without Borders. And it's the first time I've actually done that, where it's not just the heart cry of what's going on there, but taking it, so to speak, into my own spiritual prayer life and then writing it in my journal. Because what they're asking for is a ceasefire, because it's such a crying humanitarian need. So I guess what I do want to say is, and I've known this for a long time, my first ministry is my prayer, but out of that comes the writing, whether it's in my journal or a note to somebody, or I'm also an artist of a certain kind, not quite like your mother's, but just those little steps, because otherwise you can easily be overwhelmed. And yet you're thinking, okay, I have a to-do list. I got these things done. And then maybe I didn't get everything done, but I got the most essential things done. Hmm.
Thank you, Mimi. Thank you for that.
Thank you,
I'm
Kate.
curious. Yeah, thank you for that. And the just pulling on this point of journaling, I'm curious if others have sort of a daily writing morning, so a lot of people evoke Julia Cameron and morning pages, and whether, that's an important practice for others on the call, or does anyone else want to come in with a comment about their goals? And actually, what I'm going to do is go ahead and stop the recording just so we can have a community discussion now. So let me just stop recording for a second.